Luffy's Devil Fruit is one of the most important aspects of the story. But what would happen if Luffy ate a different Devil Fruit instead of the Gomu Gomu no Mi or the mythical Nika fruit? How would the One Piece story develop if Luffy had snagged the Fire Fruit instead of the Gomu Gomu no Mi, who will be Luffy's toughest opponent in the story? Let's find out. But first, let's check out the Mera Mera no Mi. The Mera Mera no Mi is one of the few known Logia fruits in the story. With the abilities of the Fire Fruit, the user can produce fire, manipulate it, and transform himself into fire. This makes the user immune to physical attacks without haki. Almost every Logia fruit also has a specific weakness. The whole thing is reminiscent of the rock paper scissors principle from the Pokemon games. For example, the Fire Fruit is weak against the Magma Fruit, but also against water. The classic Devil Fruit weakness also applies here. In this run, Shanks simply found the Mera Mera no Mi on Six's island and brought it to Fuchsia village where Luffy ate it. Some of you have already said in the video about Luffy and the Dragon Fruit that Ace would receive the Gum Gum Fruit instead of Luffy, so be it. In this timeline, Ace has the Gum Gum Fruit. Luffy starts his journey like in the original timeline at the age of 70. In the East Blue Saga, Luffy has to face a total of 7 antagonists in the story. Many of the fights will be quite similar to the original timeline, but one of these fights will be much more difficult for Fire Luffy. Luffy's first opponent in the East Blue is Alvida. She is defeated directly by a Heiken. Next up is Morgan, who attempts to attack Luffy with his wooden accent, but quickly realizes that he cannot cause physical damage to Luffy. In the anime, Morgan explains the concept of Devil Fruits more extensively. According to Morgan, they are Devil Fruit users who can create fire or trigger tsunamis, so if Morgan encounters a Luffy with a Fire Fruit, he realizes that the legends about the Fire Devil Fruit user are really true. Morgan is also easily defeated with a Heiken. Next up we have Buggy, Luffy's first Devil Fruit opponent in the story. This former member of the Roger Pirates and future Yonko has no chance against our Fire Boy. He is also easily defeated by a Heiken. At Syrup Village, Captain Kuro is also easily defeated. Similar to Morgan, Kuro realizes that none of his attacks have a chance against this Luffy. He could try to take the other Straw Hats hostage to get an unfair advantage in the fight, but with Luffy's ranged capabilities that should be no problem. Kuro is also easily defeated. Don Krieg is up next. Of course he doesn't have a chance against Fire Luffy. It would be so funny to see how he would react when he finds out that none of his gadgets has a chance against Fire Luffy. His tactic at Baratie would certainly be to throw Luffy into the water. However, since none of the Krieg pirates could catch Luffy, he would have no chance of throwing him into the water. Next up we have Arlong. This racist fishman will be the first serious opponent of Fire Luffy. Arlong's swimming pool was already a big problem for Rubber Luffy. Arlong also uses water attack. In general, fishmen and fishman karate are a weakness of this Devil Fruit. However, fishmen themselves are not immune to fire attacks. This allows Luffy to continue to inflict damage on Arlong and defeat him. Similar to Rubber Luffy, Fire Luffy will surely win this fight, however he will have to dodge many attacks of Arlong. If Luffy were to play dumb, he could theoretically lose this fight as well, because if he really falls into Arlong's swimming pool in this fight, he would take enormous damage. After all, Fire Luffy is a fireman. Luffy could also try to destroy the Arlong Park beforehand to destroy the swimming pool and eliminate the biggest weakness in this fight. In Loketown, Fire Luffy then faces Smoker. This fight will develop very similarly to the fight between Ace and Smoker in Alabasta. This fight had no real outcome. The abilities of the fruits did not directly harm each other. Fire seems to not damage Smoke, and Smoke also doesn't damage Fire. The decisive advantage of Smoker is of course his Kairoseki Yeet. This could weaken Luffy's Devil Fruit. Smoker could capture Luffy if Dragon doesn't come to the rescue again, so this fight would end in a draw if Luffy can dodge the Yeet, and end in a loss if Luffy cannot dodge the Yeet of Smoker. After the adventures in the East Blue, the Straw Hat crew then travels toward the Grand Line to face new adventures there. In the East Blue, most of Luffy's opponents simply don't have a chance against him because they don't have Haki, have little to no water ability, or don't have a Devil Fruit that can counter the Fire Fruit. On the first half of the Grand Line, Luffy has to face 11 important antagonists in order to continue his adventure. Even the first opponents on the Grand Line don't have a direct chance against Fire Luffy. Galdino's Wax has to face its natural enemy. This time the Wax figure cabinet doesn't even happen on Little Garden. Fire Luffy defeats Galdino with a Heiken. Even Warpool on Drum Island doesn't really have a chance against this Luffy. None of Warpool's attacks can harm Fire Luffy. He's also easily defeated by 1 or 2 Heikens. Similar to Ace's visit on Drum Island, the island's climate changes. After Luffy shows up on Drum Island, it suddenly stops snowing. Then it gets really exciting in Alabasta. Fire Luffy has to face the first of the 7 warlords of the sea. This is the second pure Logia fight in this timeline. Crocodile is one of those antagonists who would find his opponent's weakness. Crocodile is very intelligent and calculating. He will certainly try to somehow get water to fight Fire Luffy. If Fire Luffy can increase his temperature to 1700 degrees Celsius, he would be able to turn Sir Crocodile into glass. In this way, he would not need Haki to defeat Sir Crocodile. Otherwise, I would imagine the fight between the two being quite balanced. Similar to the original timeline, Luffy could use water to make Sir Crocodile tangible and then inflict damage to him. Luffy will have similar physical abilities to the original timeline due to his training with Sabo and Ace. The next fight would be against Bellamy on Jaya. Similar to the original timeline, Bellamy is defeated with one attack. In this case, however, it is a Hiken instead of a Gum Gum pistol. With the help of the knock-up stream, the Destroyed Pirates then travel to Skypiea. There, Fire Luffy has to face the self-proclaimed god Eneru. The third Logia fight in this timeline is coming up. This opponent of Fire Luffy is similar to the fight in the Seiryu Fruit timeline. A lightning strike can trigger up to 28,000 degrees Celsius in the air. However, this heat is only active for a fraction of a second. This means theoretically that the Goro Goro no Mi would be able to burn Fire Luffy similar to the Mago Mago no Mi. Luffy would have to avoid many of Eneru's attacks, at the same time he would have no way of inflicting damage on Eneru himself. Without the help of Viper and his Kairoseki, Fire Luffy would have no chance against this enemy. Also, like in the Seiryu Fruit timeline, a tag team takes place to defeat Eneru. However, if it were a solo match, Luffy would have lost there and the run would be over. Back in the Blue Sea, the Destroyed Pirates then meet Aokiji on Long Ring Longland. This is the first Admiral Destroyed Pirates encounter. Aokiji has eaten the Hihi no Mi. The fourth Logia fight is about to start. At first glance, one would think that the Fire Fruit has a direct advantage over Kuzan. It's kind of true, but not really. Luffy could certainly not get frozen through Kuzan's ice, and he could also protect his crew from freezing. But similar to Pokemon, the type advantage is not everything. Kuzan is several levels higher than Luffy, and he also has at least 2 types of Haki. Luffy could certainly fight against Kuzan's Devil Fruit, however Kuzan's Devil Fruit is only one aspect of the fight. Kuzan is the first opponent of Fire Luffy with Armament Haki. In addition, Kuzan has very powerful punches that can even compete with Garb. If we take these aspects into account, Fire Luffy has also no chance against Kuzan in this timeline. He faces him in a one-on-one and then saves his crew afterwards, like in the original timeline. In Water 7 and Ines Lobby, Fire Luffy then faces Rob Lucci. This time, however, Rob Lucci has no chance against Fire Luffy due to the lack of Haki. Similar to Crocodile, however, I can imagine that Rob Lucci tries to somehow get water to harm Fire Luffy. If Rob Lucci fails to do so, it's an easy win for Luffy. The same thing happens with Gekko Moria. It is still unclear whether he has Haki or not. The dude was traveling in the New World and had a clash with Kaido, so I honestly expected him to have Haki. However, since Haki is tied to the user's will, it could also be that Gekko Moria can no longer use Haki due to this defeat against Kaido and his broken will. Without Haki, the guy has no chance against Fire Luffy either. The next important opponent is Magellan in Impel Down. We have to assume 2 sceneries here. In one scenery, Magellan's poison has no effect on Fire Luffy because he cannot touch him. In the second scenery, Magellan's poison can harm Fire Luffy and defeat him. If Magellan does not have Haki, he is also unable to defeat Luffy, then Magellan's poison cannot harm Luffy. Magellan is not a Logia Devil Fruit user, so there would not really be a Logia clash here. If Magellan has Haki, he could poison Luffy and defeat him similar to Rubber Luffy. In Impel Down, Luffy also faces Blackbeard. The 5th Logia battle begins. Even though it was only a short exchange of blows, we already know the outcome of this fight. It's just Ace versus Blackbeard all over again. The only difference is that Luffy is much weaker in the story at this point than Ace was during his fight with Blackbeard. In this timeline, Luffy would also have no chance against Blackbeard and the fight would have to be cancelled again. After the Impel Down art, Luffy goes straight to Marineford to save Rubber Ace. To save Ace, Luffy has to face some characters on Marineford, but in the end, Sengoku stands in his way again. Rubber Luffy has a certain resistance to physical attacks, that's why he was able to block Sengoku's attack. However, Fire Luffy would not be able to do that, so it would be important to Luffy to quickly free Ace with Galdino so that Rubber Ace can block Sengoku's attack. Otherwise, I don't see how they want to block his attack properly. Here too, Luffy could try to use the scaffold to his advantage somehow. Unfortunately, Ace dies again in this timeline because he lets himself be provoked by Akainu again. But like in the original timeline, Luffy does not have a chance against Akainu. On the first half of the Grand Line, many opponents of Fire Luffy don't have have a direct chance against him. However, Fire Luffy also has to take some losses on the Grand Line. He doesn't really have a chance against every opponent. Kuzan, Eneru and Blackbeard pose real difficulties for Fire Luffy. Then we come to the time skip. Rayleigh teaches Luffy all 3 types of Haki, 2 years pass and the Straw Hat crew reunites on Sabaody. In the New World, Luffy will face a total of 7 antagonists. The newly acquired Haki will surely help Luffy in the New World. On Fishman Island, Luffy must face Hody Jones. Like Arlong, Hody Jones poses a certain threat to Luffy. Hody Jones has become much stronger due to the energy steroids. He can be quite dangerous for Fire Luffy through various water attacks. Luffy must avoid Hody's attacks using his observation Haki. Additionally, he must let the fight take place on the plaza. If they switch to the Noah during the fight, Fire Luffy could generate fire in the water, similar to how Rubber Luffy did. This makes little sense, but since it is established in the manga, we will go with it. But this fight will definitely not be as easy for Fire Luffy as in the original timeline. Destroyed pirates then travel to 𝚌𝚙𝚒𝚝. There Luffy has to fight Caesar. This is the 6th and for now the final Logia battle in this timeline. Caesar is another natural enemy of the Mera Mera no Mi. Caesar can create carbon dioxide through his gas fruit to extinguish fire. In this fight, Luffy would have to fight Caesar with his physical abilities. Otherwise, he would not be able to harm him with his fire. Caesar's body is vulnerable to physical attacks. If Fire Luffy can avoid Caesar's carbon dioxide attacks using his observation Haki, he can surely inflict some wounds on him. This fight could also end in a loss if Caesar manages to deprive Luffy of oxygen, similar to what happens in the original timeline. Or by somehow turning off Fire Luffy's flames. Who would have thought that Caesar could be one of the most challenging fights in this run? Nevertheless, Luffy and his friends would still get the victory in the end, as Law and Smoker are also present on 𝚌𝚙𝚒𝚝 along with the Straw Hat crew. On Dressrosa, Luffy then faces Doflamingo. This is a very interesting fight, similar to the original timeline. Depending on how well Fire Luffy can use his Devil Fruit at this point, he may even be able to burn Doflamingo's strings. In the original timeline, Sabo was probably not able to destroy the birdcage. Maybe in this timeline, the strings could be affected by fire. Luffy has much more experience with his Devil Fruit than Sabo does in the original timeline. The next opponents are Cracker and Katakuri on Whole Cake Island. In the original timeline, Luffy had to fight both of them for several hours, one at the beginning of the arc and one at the end of the arc. Cracker would have been defeated in this timeline similar to the original timeline. Nami would assist in the fight by wetting the biscuits, and then Luffy would be able to eat the cookies or burn Cracker. The fight against Katakuri would run pretty similarly. While fleeing from Big Mom, the crew could face Katakuri on the ship, or Luffy could flee with Katakuri back to the Mirror World. If the fight takes place in the Mirror World, Luffy could set the world on fire and force Katakuri to melt. Unfortunately, this fight in this timeline will not be a proper mirror match, as Fire Luffy's abilities are not necessarily similar to Katakuri's. Katakuri will try to dodge Luffy's attacks more and more with his advanced observation Haki. However, as Luffy can set the mirror world on fire, it will become increasingly difficult for Katakuri over time, leading to Luffy's victory. On Whole Cake Island, Luffy briefly faces Big Mom. In this timeline, he could try to fight against Big Mom. I suspect that Luffy does not have a direct chance against Big Mom, similar to the original timeline. His physical abilities simply are not enough to harm Big Mom. He needs the advanced armament and Conqueror's Haki for that. In Wano Kuni, Fire Luffy faces Kaido. The fight against Kaido will take place similar to the original timeline. Fire Luffy will not immediately face Kaido in a one-on-one fight, but with the other supernovas. Kaido then would have been weakened by the Red Scabbards, the Supernova, and later by Yamato. In this timeline, Kaido's Boro Breath attacks will have no effect on Luffy. If Kaido fights in his zone form, he will rely on his Kaifu attack and his Thunder Breath. In this timeline, Luffy will also have learned advanced armament and Conqueror's Haki, which will finally allow him to harm Kaido. However, in his base form, Luffy will not be able to defeat Kaido. Similar to chapter 1043, Luffy will have to trigger his awakening, allowing him to awaken the full potential of his Logia fruit. Unfortunately, as of chapter 1087, we have not seen a confirmed Logia awakening in the story, therefore we can only speculate on what a Logia awakening will be capable of. One possibility is that a Logia awakening can permanently change the climate of an island, as we saw on Raijin Island or 𝚌𝚙𝚝𝚝. Alternatively, it could work similar to the domain expansion from Jujutsu Kaisen. Can Logia awakenings possibly trap their opponents in their own created parallel world, where their elements can expand infinitely and their opponents has no way to escape? That would definitely be a broken ability. We already know that there are Devil Fruits who can create other dimensions. If we take the second scenery, then Fire Luffy could trap Kaido in a fire dimension with his awakening. Although Kaido could unleash his most powerful attack, the Fire Dragon wouldn't have a chance against a Fire Logia user. With the help of his awakening, Luffy can then defeat Kaido in this timeline as well, and Wano would be safe again. But how good is the Fire Fruit actually? Of the 25 fights in this run, Luffy won most of the fights with ease with the fire fruit. Some fights, such as against Arlong or Hody Jones, proved to be a bit more tricky due to his abilities. Against Smoker, Luffy could probably get a draw, as we have not seen the fire fruit cause damage to the smoke fruit. Sir Crocodile, on the other hand, cannot do much against Fire Luffy's heat. Luffy would have had a hard time against Eneru, Blackbeard, Kuzan and Caesar in this run. These are all other Logia users in the story. These characters are either physically stronger than Luffy, or their devil fruit can somehow counter the fire fruit. Caesar surprises here with his devil fruit. In the original timeline, no one takes this character seriously, even though he actually is a very powerful devil fruit. Sengoku is also a challenge here, but I think that will be the case in every run. Defeating or stopping the Fleet Admiral at Marineford without Haki can be extremely difficult. I would rank the fire fruit similar to the dragon fruit in the S tier. Let me know which devil fruit Luffy should eat next. And if you liked this video, check out this video where Luffy ate the dragon fruit. See you in the next one. Take care.